Welcome, everybody. Today's guest is a key figure in the health and success of New York City. She serves as the DA for Queens, which is considered to be the most diverse county in America. Let's welcome Melinda Katz to the Miller Report. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
We talked on Zoom for a while, and then we realized how much we had in common and how much we had to talk about. So then this came about. It's always great to meet a fellow New Yorker, and I have so many questions that we want to talk about. But as we know, the Miller Report is primarily a real estate podcast. And in all that you do, and I want to just boast about it, you were born and raised in Queens, you attended public school and received your law degree from St. John's.
Yes, ma'am.
You have served as the State Assembly, in the State Assembly, New York City Council, and now as Queens Borough President. And you clearly have a passion for serving your community. So
you're making me sound very old.
I know. Well, you said you're 30, and I'm 30.
only 30.
Exactly.
It's amazing what I've done.
Why did you choose this path? Like, how did this start, being that you're so young?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not that young, but I appreciate the thought. I am 59. I'll be 60 this year, which really amazes me. I've been in this business about 31 years.
Wow.
In elected service one way or the other. Council member, assembly member, borough president. And now I'm in my 6th year as being the district attorney of the county of Queens. And look, I went into politics very young. My father was the founder of the Queens Symphony Orchestra in 1953. My mother was the founder of the Queens Council on the Arts. I think she just didn't want to be upstaged by her husband, so she founded an organization in Queens as well. And you know, she died at a very young age. She was killed in a car crash. She was killed when I was 3 years old, in a car crash on a trip on her way up to see the family. And so I think that had a really massive effect on my life. And I entered politics, and I entered government and public service, really, the same way my father did as he ran a not-for-profit. But in order to be able to service people, in order to be able to help people, to be against bullies, to make sure that people had a voice who really didn't feel like they had a voice. And I think that the crash when I was 3 and not being raised by a mother. And by the way, Suzanne, remember, I was raised by a father in a world where it really was unusual, right? So my mother was killed in 1969. And my dad raised me and my 3 brothers. And I always felt like there should be a voice out there for people that don't have one.
You had a lot of testosterone around you.
I did. In the house, I had a lot of testosterone around me. I was raised 100% by them. My father never got remarried.
Wow.
And I entered a field which, you know, is law enforcement, you know, so male-oriented a lot of times.
Isn't it funny how our past shapes us, and that you just really were always probably career-driven because of the people that were around you?
Yes, but you know, it's interesting because I am told that my mother was an extremely powerful woman as well in her own right. Right, she founded the orchestra with my father. She founded the Queens Council on the Arts. She was the president of PTA. You know, all that kind of stuff that people did back then, and it does shape your life. And my career, I've been extremely fortunate and had good people around me who were able to guide me in my life. So I ended up back at St. John's because my father also was ill at the time, so I was taking care of him, and then he died, and I came back to Queens. But, you know, I'm a Queens girl. I just moved from our family house, which we bought in 1953.
Which part of Queens?
Forest Hills, and I've been living there ever since, since I was born, but also for the record, way before I was born. My family was in that house since 53. Just moved 3 years ago, 3 blocks from my original house. So I'm a woman of tradition, a woman who likes to have a sustainability in her life, consistency in her life. And so I love government service. I love public service.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's so insightful, and it really does explain who you are and all those successful women out there. I'm sure we all have a story. I have a story. We have a story of what propels us and what makes us really want to fight and do something good because we just have it in us. We're not really sure if we're born with it. What is it? Genetic versus environment?
Nature versus nurture.
Nature, yes.
I think there's a little of both in everyone. I think a lot of it is you know, also who's important in your life. And, you know, the role models you follow. When I was growing up, Geraldine Ferraro was a larger than life person in Forest Hills. She lived in Forest Hills. We knew her. We hung out with her. Her children were around. You know, so that was also a very large role model for me. And Donna Zuccaro is still very strong in the political world, and in a lot of the not-for-profits as well.
So as I said before we started, I was just researching this morning, and I came upon this case because the Miller Report is primarily a real estate podcast. Yep. I always have my slogan is, without good politics, we don't have any value in our real estate. So you have to have common sense politicians in order to have any value in your real estate, which is why we interview both and we care about both. There was a case in Queens in which I believe, and you could tell us, that somebody lost their parents and a squatter moved in. So they found death records, and it was an unoccupied home. So a squatter moved in, took the keys, and started to live in the house and then rent out the rooms and make income from a dead person's family. I don't know if this is true. I'm just reading this, true. And it came upon your desk, and you sentenced them. Tell us what happened.
Well, first of all, a little bit of context. I was the city council chair of the land use committee. Mm-hmm. So on 9/11, there was an election, 2001, and I was elected 2 weeks later when the election was postponed, and I became the chairwoman of the land use committee, which means anytime you wanted to rezone something, it went through my committee. And I became very involved in real estate and very involved in the value of building and making sure that we had jobs and all of that came with it. But also the idea of ownership of a piece of property is very important. And there was a Channel 7 report on a woman who was arrested because she changed the locks when people who said they had a right to be in her house left. So they left. She came in. She kept saying, "You have to get out of my house." They wouldn't get out of the house. They were trespassing. And she waited, and then she changed the locks. Now, Channel 7 happened to have been following her on this because she asked for help. And so she goes in, she changes the locks, and the police who show up at a residence, and they don't know, right? They're not lawyers. Right. They have to listen to whoever's on the scene. She ends up getting arrested.
The owner of the house gets arrested.
The owner of the house ends up getting arrested for changing the locks because
because you can't forcibly lock somebody out.
Well, because people show up. The law enforcement shows up. She says, "I own this house. Here's my deed." He says, "I have a lease." She signed the lease. This is her signature, or this is.
And was the lease forged?
It was not hers, and it was forged. And she never signed it. She never gave permission to be in. So there was this I don't know if you want to call it habit, but there was this protocol in New York where if you were somewhere over 30 days, that you could stay in the house, right? That you had a right to stay if you could prove through utility bills, Uber Eats receipts, Shake Shack receipts, whatever it was, that you could really after 30 days, you have to go to civil court.
Was this past 30 days?
It was within the 30 days, but it didn't matter to me because after we started, it was after.
Right.
So as time went on, it became after. But this is my point. I got back to the office, and what I would say the queens of the New York came out in me, right? Because I went back to my office, and I said, this is ridiculous. I want every real property law, every criminal law on property, everything on my desk by 12 o'clock, and I want the team to gather, and we need to figure out what to do. We're lawyers. We should be able to fix this. Turns out that we were right. You can't trespass on someone else's property, and I say this in my best Queens accent. You don't have a right to say that you can go into someone else's house and stay there. I don't care how many Shake Shack receipts you have.
And you don't care if it's a day or a month or a year or a week.
That's right. If you originally go over a threshold of someone's front door illegally as a trespass, and then you go in and you stay there, you didn't have a right originally to be there. And yes, the man that was sentenced, we finally sentenced him to 2 years, he was not only there, he was renting the rooms out. And so we charged him with grand larceny for the rent.
Love it.
And so the point really is, though, that you enter the house illegally. So I want to make sure that your listeners understand this. I'm not talking about your kids. I'm not talking about any in-laws or whoever that come to your house and stay for 30 days. I am also not talking about a tenant. Right, a tenant who had legal permission to enter the premises. After 30 days, you really do have to go to landlord-tenant court. And so, we've had a lot of cases like that where people are reporting those that are staying in a house.
How'd they get into the house?
So normally they break in this particular one. I think it was a window. I forgot which case. We have so many cases now. And then changed the locks, then rented it out,
then claimed it was theirs.
Yes. We had another case that came up straight away where a broker was trying to sell a house and noticed that the locks were changed. and reported it. So my point to you is that, as long as there's a complainant, right? Like, a lot of neighbors will call us and say, there's someone in this house that doesn't, that we don't think owns the house. You really do need a complainant. But at the end of the day, we are willing to investigate it. It is illegal. You can't claim a right to be there just because you broke in and stayed. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Let's stay on law and order. Let's talk about, as a DA, you're all about law enforcement, I'm sure. What are your thoughts about bail reform?
So our real issue is, we are the only state in the United States that doesn't have dangerousness as a component for bail reform, right? For asking for bail. So anytime that we ask for bail, it's really about risk of flight. And this person's not going to show back up in court. We need to make sure that we either remand that person or ask for bail. As time has gone by, the truth is that most of the violent crimes are the qualifying crimes, right? So in other words, gun possession, robbery in the second degree, a felony crime, things of that nature, assault 2 and above, you can already ask for bail, and we actually do that quite often, and we get it. The ones that aren't qualifying for bail, the ones that you can't ask for bail, the legislature actually changed the law about 2 years ago, where if it's a second case and it's an open crime, you can ask for bail based on a provision called 4T. It doesn't matter what the provision's called, but you can ask for it. And we have found between 40 and 45% of our asks are given for bail. So some sort of holding for that individual. If they don't show back up in court, they lose money. And so we have found that to be quite successful. But we are still the only state where you can't use dangerousness as part of it. But most of the time, like I said,
you can't use dangerous as part of it.
No, but you can use risk of flight because they're not convicted yet, right? So you can use risk of flight. We do that often. We're very successful usually in those applications. And the legislature and the governor, I'm sure you just saw, just changed the discovery laws, which were really a reason for a lot of our dismissals. And so we're looking forward to using that new law. It becomes effective in about 90 days.
Can you take us to what the new law is?
So it's a new discovery law. But what's happening is that under the new law of 2020, the prosecutors, my office, prosecution, has to deliver evidence to a defendant within a certain amount of time, whatever it is, 20, 35, 65 days, depending on the circumstances. And then after we deliver that evidence, which, by the way, I think is totally fair, right? And I think it was needed. You shouldn't be able to deliver evidence the night before a trial. It's not fair. They can't figure out their defense. They can't work with their clients. And so for us to deliver that evidence is I think, a good thing in the law. But what was happening is that we would file our discovery, and then we would file a certificate of compliance, which means everything within the due diligence of our office that we are deemed to have, you now have. And what was happening is time would go by, and we only have a certain amount of time to try someone, and the defense attorneys or whoever it was would make a motion that we didn't give them everything. There was a crime scene and there were 20 cops there and we didn't deliver the 20th memo book. There was a crime scene and we didn't deliver the 15th body cam. I mean, so what was happening is cases were getting dismissed because of an invalid certificate of compliance. The legislature just changed it, gave the defense a certain amount of time to file that, made sure that the time after that wasn't counted against us. And made standards for that. So we're very hopeful that legislation will lead to more justice in the courtrooms and not a gotcha type of thing. And so we're very thankful that they worked on it. And it makes sense. There's now 5.5 years of data.
But even if they do produce bail and they go to jail, aren't they out of jail in the 3 days?
So no, I mean, if someone gets bail or remand, usually it's meant to make sure that they show back up in court. So you're supposed to ask for a certain amount of money or a bail or a bond that will assure that they show back up in court. We've had very good outcomes on those, and that's fine. It's interesting to me when we talk about bail and we talk about discovery and you talk about things that are wrong with the law. I feel like my job is to make sure that we hold people accountable. The laws are the laws. I have to work within the laws. I have to make sure that I use every possible tool that's available to me to hold people accountable and make victims whole. And that's what we do. The squatters case is the perfect example of it. There was a habit of when people were in a piece of property for over 30 days, that, well, now you have to go to civil court. That was like a habit that had gotten entrenched in New York City. And it just wasn't true. You can't trespass and then say you have a right to stay there. And so we thought outside the box. We worked with NYP Legal. We worked with all the people we were supposed to and made sure that we're within the law. And so I do what I can with the tools that I am given.
Let's move over to ICE, which I don't know how you're working with them, but what is your office's role in working with ICE in regards to these deportations?
We don't work with ICE. It's a civil action, so it's not about us. I will tell you this, though. I want to hold people accountable for the crimes that they commit. And if we don't do that, I think that's a problem in the city, right? We have to hold them accountable. So, I'll give you an example. We had a self-proclaimed Trans de Aragua man on a motorcycle or a scooter. He was stopped on a traffic infraction. He wasn't wearing a helmet. He was driving the wrong way on a sidewalk. 3 police officers tried to stop him. He ran away. One police officer got on the scooter, one police officer got on in the car, one police officer ran after him. And when they caught him and tried to arrest him, he shot at them. He shot one in the leg, shot one in the chest. He had a vest on, and they shot him back and arrested him. So this is a perfect example. He's facing 80 to life, right? Because attempted murder.
But there was an accident.
No, it wasn't an accident.
Caught him in an accident, sort of.
Well, it wasn't really an accident. He was stopped rightfully by the police officers for certain infractions, and they tried to arrest him, and he wasn't going to be taken, and so he ran. So the point is that I believe he should be held accountable for those crimes, right? And he's facing 80 to life right now if we go to trial. And that's just one example. We have another example where we took down some Trans de Aragua gun traffickers, right? And they're facing up to, I think it's 25 years. It was 33 guns bought by an undercover officer. And, we can talk about deportation and immigration all we want, but at the end of the day, I do think that people should have to be accountable for the crimes that they commit in this country. And we hold them accountable.
And what challenges are you dealing with these gangs? Does that come to your desk?
Sure. So we have long-term investigations. I'm not a district attorney that I will get the one person who buys a gun. I will get the runner of narcotics. I will arrest them on the street for the work they're doing. But I'd like to think my office is becoming known for doing long-term investigations. And those get to the hierarchy, right? We just took down a car trafficking ring, a car theft ring last week, in fact. And we had 20 people arrested in one day. 14 of whom we arrested for an enterprise, which means, by the way, qualifying for bail, right? Because it was an enterprise. As one person went out of that enterprise or that ring, another person replaced them. There was coordination between the people that were stealing the cars on the street, who were, by the way, using the fobs. They were buying fobs on the internet, and they were creating their own data for the fobs to be used for certain cars. Then we had the brokers, so the thieves, the brokers, and the sellers, all of whom were coordinated and working together.
Wow.
And so we took them down for an enterprise last week. And 14 of them were qualifying for bail because they were an enterprise. Out of the other 6, 2 of them had guns, so that was also qualifying for bail. But my point is that they will serve time for the crime that they committed, and it was a long-term investigation, which means you have to work really hard.
Has your life ever been threatened when you deport any of these people? Can you want to share that with us?
So we wouldn't talk about internal threats at all. I can only tell you that, we are unafraid.
You're unafraid.
Unafraid to move forward.
That's why you have all these handsome men next to you?
Yes. Well, I'm unafraid to move forward and hold people accountable and to make sure that we catch the right people. It's not just about putting people and prosecuting, putting them in jail and prosecuting. It's also about finding the right individuals. And by the way, I also realize that part of my job, because I've been an elected official for over 30 years now in some capacity, I find that part of my job is also reaching out to the communities and making sure that young people know that there's a face to law enforcement and that we care deeply about the parents who are trying to have their children go on a better path. So at the same time as we're prosecuting, We're also making sure that we have a young people's youth group. They go into the junior high schools. They go into the high schools. They will talk to parents who believe that their child is on the wrong path. We have an Explorers program. We have an internship program. And I think it's important to do both. So when you talk about gang activity, it's as important to take down the gangs. And we have found that there is a direct correlation between taking down gangs and less shootings. And so we take down the gangs, but we also try to get the kids out of that life and try to convince them, however we can, that gangs should not be your chosen family and that there are other options in your community.
Are you seeing any correlation from the people at the border with increased crime levels, or is that just...
We don't. So we prosecute for the crimes that they commit without even...
So you don't know where they're coming from?
Right. We don't really ask, and we don't know. But I will tell you that if you are running guns or running narcotics or human trafficking, we will hold you accountable for that, whether you've been here, since birth or not. We will hold you accountable for that. So we have found that having that type of attitude really makes sure that people do face justice and the victims actually get justice. And it works for us in the way that we prosecute.
Is it true that 70% of the crimes are done by the same repeat offenders? Yes,
recidivists are a huge issue. Recidivist means that they keep coming back and doing the same crime over and over again. And I think that is a huge problem. We have found that some of the squatters, by the way, have done other homes before.
It's a business. They can rent out the apartments.
Right, and they can do that. We have found that a lot of shoplifters they'll come back to the same place. So when you talk about the revolving door...
Shoplifters.
Right. So that's another example, right? So we think outside the box. So we were having shoplifters come back time and time again, but it wasn't only about shoplifters. It was also about those that would come into stores and threaten people or go after, parents with children, things of that nature in the store. It was also about the lack of control that people who own the stores and work there felt that they had, right? They didn't have the control over their store.
I mean, you talk to any grocery owner, any drugstore, it's millions of dollars in security and locked up items. Is it true that you could take up to $900 of groceries or toiletries without going to jail?
So no, it's still a misdemeanor charge up to that, and so you'd still be held accountable. It's interesting because
$900.
It's $1,000, but yes, but it's sort of not the issue. The issue is what to do with them once they get into the system and how to keep them from going back. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what does a misdemeanor mean? So I can go in $900, and what's going to happen to me?
So misdemeanor means that you have the opportunity or the threat of spending 364 days or lower in jail. So it would be sentenced to Rikers Island. It's a misdemeanor. It's 364 days or less. A felony is a year or above. So this is a good example of what can be done within the law. So I created in Queens what's called a trespass affidavit, and each borough has their own form of it, right? Because I can tell you crime went down, right? I can tell you the crime index goes down and the index crimes that are out there, the major crimes have gone down. But let me tell you, when you're standing in a CVS or a Walgreens and you're pushing a button to get your toothpaste or your shampoo, and you know that some guy has to come over or someone from the office, from the store has to come over and give you that after they announce it over the loudspeaker, which you don't like anyway, and then you're standing in line to pay your bill, and you're still standing there paying your bill because that's what good New Yorkers do. Right, and someone comes in with a shopping bag and walks out with hundreds of dollars.
I was actually online at a CVS and somebody did that, and then they came back because they said they forgot their orange juice.
Right, so to you, crime is at 100%.
Right.
Because you are now a witness and you're seeing it, and you feel like, why am I standing here waiting to pay my bill, and people are walking in and out. So in Queens, we worked with the NYPD to form a trespass affidavit, right? Which means that if you come back after you shoplift or you're harassing people in my store, I call the police department, and we have an agreement with the police department to serve a trespass affidavit on body cam to the individual that's causing disruption.
What does body cam mean?
So it means the police officers, when they approach a subject, they should have their body cam on. And they're recording the incident. So you have a right to call the cops. They will serve you with a trespass affidavit, and if you come back, you're going to get arrested.
That's for the second.
For the second one, if you come back, because the first one is not really about a crime. The first one is you've already shoplifted, you've gone out, you've come back, or you're harassing someone. Because the truth is that if you're committing a crime, there's no trespass affidavit. We're arresting you for the crime. So over 1,400 trespass affidavits have been served in Queens on people, and only 80 people came back to the stores, which means that over 1,300 people are getting the message. They're not coming back. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it is a tool.
Up in these stores? They're not making money.
Crime's going a little bit. Dependent larceny is reducing, but it's still a hard career.
Yeah, I'd rather go online. I'm not going to wait online for my toothpaste. And This is an issue, and it's killing the environment because it comes in 5 boxes for one little thing of toothpaste. So we're all we have to be in this together, and it starts with law and order. So, Melinda, I know you're not allowed to talk about politics, but it's the elephant in the room, and everybody asks the same questions, and I talk to all my guests, and I ask the same question at the end. Who are you endorsing, not as the DA, but as a citizen? Who do you think will be the best candidate to run this city?
So there is no line between me being a DA and a citizen.
No, you wouldn't answer the question.
Well, according to the rules, I'm not actually allowed to endorse a candidate. All I can say is that, we work hard in Queens on law enforcement and also keeping people out of the courtroom as well, like young people out of the justice system. And so, I'm looking forward to whoever is the mayor next to be a good partner in that and make sure that we are able to fight as a city for the well-being of New Yorkers. And I think that's important. But yeah, as the district attorney, it's a semi-judicial role, and we don't endorse or get involved in politics.
How do you think Curtis would do?
He makes great children.
Everybody, they have a child together.
We have 2
everybody
children.
to know so Melinda was actually married to Curtis. And she's agreed to do this, and he's got great taste because she's beautiful. So Curtis, I didn't know you were such a stud.
Well, he makes his children are great. He has 2 children with me, and so that relationship there continues. And his children are really.
He's a good dad.
His children are wonderful. He's a good dad. He does what he needs to do, and he's a busy guy. But and I always say he's a little mashugana, but he makes great children.
You give him a lot of Jewish stuff to talk about. He knows a lot.
He does know a lot, and he was very involved in our community when we were together. It was a long time ago. Our kids are now 17 and 14. And so one is looking for college, one is going to high school. And so, it's being a mom is probably the best job that I've ever had, truthfully. I've had a lot of jobs.
That's great.
But being a mom is the best one and the most difficult. They are teenagers.
Ditto.
So anyone who has teenage kids understands what I'm talking about.
Well, thank you for coming on the Miller Report. I think we could end on that. And Curtis, please go viral with this.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you
for your work for the city.
Thank you. This is great.